I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I know you are as well. So let's just dive right in. Prop 8, Ted Olson. Why did you get involved?
Well, I grew up in California. When Proposition 8 was passed, I was very disappointed in my home state. It seemed so unlike California. California is a frontier state. It's a place where diversity and different ideas are respected. I was very, very disappointed in my fellow citizens that they would erect into our Constitution, into the state's Constitution, a barrier against the decency and respect for gay and lesbian citizens in California.
Why is a conservative disappointed in citizens who say a marriage should be between a man and a woman?
Marriage, it seems to me, and the Supreme Court has looked into this and decided this many times, is a fundamental value. It's a part of our freedom of association and liberty and privacy, and it's an identification of who you are. When two loving individuals want to form a lasting relationship, an enduring relationship, and be a part of a community and a part of a neighborhood, that's a conservative value. And I always felt that conservatives should respect people who loved one another, who wanted to have that kind of relationship, and we should support them.
And in this partnership, you bring the liberal side. Why did you get so involved in this? And what was your influence on this conservative guy here?
Well, I'm the reason he's in the case. No. Interesting that people like to do that to me, because anyone who really knows Ted and our friends who actually know him from the beginning are not surprised that Ted took this case. And
so what did it mean to you?
And I married him because I'm not surprised that he took this case. He's a humanist at heart, and this was the first time I actually agreed with one of his positions in his career, one of the first times. So it was thrilling on that level for me to be able to join in and be his partner. But I have to say that this 6 years now we're into this movement and this effort, and it has enhanced our relationship and enriched us as people, I think, individually too.
The case has enhanced your relationship?
Absolutely.
Why and how?
It's because we have touched human beings up close and personal, and we're reminded on a daily basis of it. And the gratitude, Frank, and the outpouring from the community at large, and people who aren't in the gay community, people at large who understand how profoundly changing this movement is for all of us. For all of us.
Ted, this is your life partner, and it could be contrary or not, but your legal partner, and let me put up a picture here of you and your legal partner, David Boies, getting ready for an interview there. The Odd Couple. How'd that happen? And why did the Odd Couple come together over same-sex marriage?
I'm glad you said odd couple rather than a strange bedfellow. When I first got involved in the case, I was aware of the fact of my reputation as a conservative, especially because of Bush versus Gore and some other cases. And I wanted, and those of us who were involved in the case wanted to send a signal to the courts of this country and to the people of this country that it wasn't about conservatives or liberals or Republicans or Democrats, that it was about America. And we wanted to get someone on the other side of the political spectrum, and we thought the most perfect person, because David Boies is just about, if not the best lawyer in America. He's absolutely sensational. And I thought how perfect it would be to have David, who represented Al Gore, as a part of this team, so that we could present this issue to this country and people would give us the opportunity to talk about why we were doing this, because we felt influencing public opinion was almost as important or as important as influencing the courts. So it was David Boies and Ted Olson, and it took attention away from what's the politics
and you were
of this.
playing to the court of public opinion, even as you were playing to the court of legal opinion. In your book, Redeeming the Dream, which you'll be signing in a few minutes, you wrote, "We both felt deeply that Proposition 8 was wrong and fundamentally at odds with our vision of America."
Absolutely. Go back to 1776 and the Declaration of Independence, that all people are created equal.
Yeah, but all those white boys didn't ever envision two men or two women getting married.
It was an imperfect implementation of a dream, an ideal. And we were wrong because we discriminated and put people who were African Americans into slavery. And we fixed that, or we made a big step towards fixing that with the 14th Amendment. And I mention that because of Abraham Lincoln talks in the Gettysburg Address about the same thing. This country was founded on that belief of all people being created equal. We're aspiring to that dream. We called the book Redeeming the Dream because we wanted to get the point across is that we're trying to help deliver to the people of this country the redemption of that dream, that they will be treated equally in society and that their race should not matter and their sexual orientation.
Lady, it's often observed that the two of you have 20 years between you. Is this, and I'm not talking about this being your marriage, is this generational? Is that why all this change has happened so fast?
I think that it is somewhat generational, but I want to talk for a minute about the Perry trial, because I think part of the reason that we can, unlike in race relations, we haven't integrated in the mainstream heterosexual society as much because we have been living in a myopic universe somewhat and not appreciating who our fellow citizens are. I think the Perry trial, Ted and David standing up and really getting America's attention, partly because of their bipartisan nature and partly because Ted is such an unlikely avatar, if you will, for this issue that people looked, what? Ted Olson, what is he? America kind of woke up, and as a result, they started paying attention to our case, our trial, put the human face on this, and voila, we're all human beings, we're all Americans, we're all the same. Chris and Sandy and Jeff and Paul are part of our family, and I think when they were introduced at trial, and then the 3 weeks following on, that enabled America to see that we're all the same, and we all deserve the same rights, and most importantly, the right to love.
Ted, your plaintiffs were Paul Katami and Jeff Cirillo, and Chris Perry and Sandy Shire. And I should say that Chris and Sandy are in the audience today. Is that not right? Could you stand up?
Sandy.
Why them? Why them, and why Chris and Sandy and Paul and Jeff? Because there was quite a process you went through to choose the right people.
Well, we wanted to make sure. We knew that this was going to be a potentially, and it turned out to be a long battle. We knew that the individuals who were going to be the face of the case were going to be subject to a lot of pressure, and some of it unpleasant. And if you see the movie, The Case Against 8, which HBO produced with respect to this, you'll see some of that. We had to have people that could be articulate and explain who they were. And we had to have people that could stand the pressure and the spotlight. And we looked very carefully, because the worst thing that we could do is to find people, put them out there, and then find something that the public might come up with in this day and age. As it turned out, that Chris and Sandy and Paul and Jeff were the perfect plaintiffs.
Why?
They were so real, they were so normal, but they were so special. And they turned out to be the most articulate spokespersons that you could possibly imagine. Lady talked about the trial. The centerpiece of the trial was David and I introduced our plaintiffs to the judge and to that courtroom and to the American people, and asked them just to tell everyone about themselves and their lives. And everyone in that courtroom understood that what we were seeing was the face of discrimination.
What's the 14th Amendment say?
The 14th Amendment guarantees due process and equal protection of laws to all citizens. The protection of equal laws is Proposition 8 that says that these individuals who are a part of our society, who are our citizens, can be told in their Constitution that the laws are not equal to them.
So through the California courts, to the California Supreme Court, back to the Ninth Circuit, ultimately to the Supreme Court, was that the core of your argument throughout, and is that what ultimately prevailed?
Absolutely. That is what this case is all about. The fundamental right to marry, the Supreme Court has said, is the most important right that we have. The Supreme Court has said that 14 times in various different ways, in various different types of cases. And the Supreme Court has said we cannot distinguish among classes of Americans. We can't put some people in a class because of the color of their skin, their religion, whether they're illegitimate, and we say their sexual orientation. And to divide those people out and make them separate and make them less, that is unconstitutional.
Lady, you were there every step of the way. What was the most difficult moment for you, for the team, as you saw it?
You know, I have to say, Frank, the trial was executed so beautifully, and there was such a camaraderie and cooperation between two pretty big egos, Ted and David, and they're, let's face it,
you promised you wouldn't say that.
No.
You mean a guy who's been in front of the Supreme Court 61 times has an ego?
This case, I have to just set the stage for you just briefly here. You know, our side of the courtroom, this federal courtroom resembled a chapel to me in many ways. It was
The courtroom resembled a chapel.
a chapel, a wedding chapel, if you will.
How
The
appropriate.
benches, indeed, right? The benches were seriatim, and our side was packed every day on the right-hand side. Would that be the bride or the groom's side? We were packed every day with loving couples clasping hands, holding hands, squeezed together like sardines in those benches. It was standing room only every day, and these are people who love each other and want to marry. It was a palpable feeling. The energy in the room was indescribably joyful, electric, full of love. And as the trial progressed, I think it affected everyone involved, no question, but even the other side.
Ted, you had an exchange with Antonin Scalia at the Supreme Court, which is a dramatic moment in the film and had to have been a dramatic
If you're
moment.
in the same room with Justice Scalia, you will have electric exchanges.
So you say this is a measure, and hearing you with your voice standing, this is a measure that walls off the institution of marriage, you said, which is not society's right. It's an individual's right that this course again and again and again has said the right to get married, the right to have a relationship of marriage is a personal right, you said. It's part of the right of privacy, association, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And he said?
Oh, he said then, when did that become a constitutional right that people of the same sex could get married? What day did that happen?
And you said?
I said, there's no answer to that question as a matter of constitutional law, but what I said was, when did it become unconstitutional to deprive interracial couples of the right to get married? When was the day when it became unconstitutional to tell people of color they couldn't go to the same school? And the point being, we recognize constitutional rights when they're decided in the Supreme Court. There isn't a date when it happened. The date when it happened is when we became a people of Constitution. Finally, we recognize the imperfect place that we are, and we recognize people's
And how did he
equality.
respond to you?
He said, don't answer my question with the question.
Yes, he took, I think, mischievous advantage of their friendship. He kept boring in with the question, but something interesting did occur in that colloquy where he said, oh, that's easy, regarding interracial marriage and desegregation. That's the 14th Amendment. That's 1868 when it was ratified. Well, wait a second. That's a huge negotiation with his originalism. That's, the Brown case and Loving were 84, 86 years after 1868 and 99 years after in the case of Loving.
Let me show you a picture. I want to put another picture up here. And this is after you've argued in the Supreme Court. After you've argued in the Supreme Court, you're coming out. And you're hugging one of the plaintiffs, and everybody's holding hands, and there looks like you're celebrating there. Did you know when you presented those arguments that you were going to prevail? Did you have a doubt?
I believed from the beginning of this case that we were going to prevail. But this is the culmination of 4 or 5 years of adrenaline, preparation, anxiety, emotion, togetherness, and the affinity that we all felt for one another. You can see there. We were exhilarated that we had finally presented to the Supreme Court of the United States the rights of those individuals, and they were in court hearing their cause presented to the highest court in the land. And we all felt enormous feeling of togetherness and excitement.
Let's talk about the values behind all this for just a moment. Ted, you said marriage is a conservative value, but when it comes to same-sex marriage, aren't those fighting words within conservative circles? I mean, Rush Limbaugh, if I got it right, said, "I don't know what happened to Ted Olson. Ted Olson used to be one of us."
You want me to react to that?
I think that might be interesting.
What I have tried to convey to people, anybody who will listen to me, and this country is changing very, very rapidly. One of us is, to the extent that I'm talking about conservatives, we're talking about government respecting the liberty and freedom and equality of all of our citizens. I believe as a conservative, that is a conservative value. I also believe, and David Boies does too, that it's a liberal value. It's an American value. That's at the bottom of this. And we need, in this country, all of us, to aspire to eliminate the imperfections that we've had in our country's Constitution for 227 years, or whatever the number is these days.
Lady, I asked you how the world around you at one point when we were preparing for this was responding, and you talked to me about some of the letters you got. And I asked you for a couple of them, and I'd read briefly 2 of them. Dear Mr. Olson, I'm not gay and I'm not conservative, but after listening to your intervention before the 9th Circuit yesterday, that was in California, I'm this close to starting a Ted Olson fan club. Keep up the good fight, and thanks for standing up for the integrity of the legal profession. Dear Mr. Olson, I'm not sure I've ever been prouder to be an attorney. I've been married to 26 years to my female wife and have 2 heterosexual sons. I'm sure you've been receiving hate mail from the bigots, but you, sir, are a brave champion of justice. If there's a National Atticus Finch Award, it should be named after you and Mr. Boies. You're firmly on the correct side of history, fairness, and justice. Is this the tone of the letters, most of the letters you got?
Absolutely.
Did you get hate mail, too? How were people reacting to you and to Ted throughout this very public, very controversial case?
The vast majority of the letters were positive. They were affirmative, and it was our daily orange juice, frankly. It was
Did you get a lot?
medicine daily, especially during the year 2000.
Some of the letters,
2010,
some of the
year
letters
the
I
trial.
didn't bring home.
I think he withheld some of the negative ones, but by a mile, they were more positive than negative. He admitted, and it wasn't just letters. It was people expressing their gratitude. In a recent case, a gentleman passing us in an airplane simply pointed at his wedding ring and mouthed the words, "Thank you." These are just, it's part of it that I can't express how enriching it is, because it's so humbling for us to receive this unfair. I mean, many people deserve gratitude, but it makes you want to share it. It creates a virtuous cycle of humility and therefore love and gratitude to others. And it's fueled us. It's broadened our horizons in our family, our constituents, as we sometimes call them. We would do anything, and we did do anything during that year. I ended up doing sushi runs during the court proceedings in 2010.
Ted, how do you rank this up against this long career you've had? Bush v. Gore, Citizens United, Jonathan Pollard the spy. You've been involved in some of the most consequential legal battles of our time, and now this.
This is the most important thing that I've ever done.
The most important thing you've ever done?
As a lawyer and as a person. What we've tried to do, and we've only been a small part of it. We know we've only been a small part of it. There's been many, many other people. But what we've tried to do is to help people get out of the discriminatory box that our governments have put them in. And if we've made some progress, and I think that we have, and we help contribute to this being a better place for our citizens to be, what could be better than that?
Has it changed
to have whatever my talent is and my experience is, to be able to put that to work for that kind of an outcome, that nothing could be more gratifying.
Has it changed you as a human being?
I'm sure, well, it certainly has, absolutely has. It's given me more insight about myself. It's given me more insight, as Lady said, about our marriage, about our country, its history, the Constitution. If the great blessing is it gave us an opportunity to be in that trial and to watch experts and listen to experts talk about what marriage meant when slaves were finally entitled to get married, the whole history, but to learn about ourselves, to learn about how much discrimination, how much damage discrimination does to individuals every single moment of every single day. Those are things that everybody in this country should be exposed to.
And not being able to get married is discriminatory.
Yeah, the trial he alluded to, one day of the trial was particularly interesting. Nancy Cott, an historian from Harvard, testified that at the time of emancipation, the slaves literally flocked to the courthouses to marry. And these were people, of course, who had formed family units, had held secret ceremonies. They were forbidden to marry before emancipation. And when they did, they overwhelmed the state government offices because so important to them as a concept of freedom, to bind themselves to another and to be sanctioned by our government, get the imprimatur of societal approval. It was so important that they literally overwhelmed the government offices. That was just one of those days in the courtroom where you could have heard a pin drop. I have diaries of pin drop days and moments, of course, starting with our plaintiff's testimony, which is, you cannot possibly describe in this brief TED Talk, but was so compelling because they testified about what indeed it is like to be gay in America and to be denied the most fundamental right that we have to love and to marry the person we love.
So to that point, this case is not done. We've seen in just the last few days in Indiana and in Arkansas, religious freedom is what it's called. There's a big case pending before the United States Supreme Court. Where is this all going?
Well, I believe, and I hope, and I expect, and I believe that at the end, this case will be argued. It involves the remaining, there's 37 states where marriage equality is respected and honored. There are remaining 13 states. The remaining 13 states are at issue in one form or another in the Supreme Court case that will be argued at the end of this month and decided by the end of June. It is my expectation and my hope and my belief that the Supreme Court will recognize for all Americans the right to marry the person that you love. And this part of this history will be behind us. There are many, many steps remaining, and this country will never be perfect, but that will be a huge step that we will have marriage equality all over the United States so that Chris and Sandy, who can be married in California, can move to Kentucky and still be married.
Let me ask you both. Let me ask you both this last question in the couple of minutes we have left. 50 years ago, Martin Luther King walked across that bridge in Selma. And much is still to be done, but when we look back, that is a resonant turning point moment. When we look back on this moment 50 years from now, we will have a Supreme Court decision, presumably in June, and we have these issues that we've discussed. What do you both think and want scholars and citizens to think of this moment 50 years from that point?
That finally we have evolved. Indeed, we have evolved. And I believe our contribution in the Perry case, we're just one slice in this ongoing history that started long before our particular trial and our case started. But that I do believe we accelerated the pace of change. And I believe that Martin Luther King's moral arc is bending just a little bit more steeply toward justice. And I think that we will all feel in the end how foolish we were not to have recognized these rights sooner.
50 years ago was the Selma. 48 years ago was the Supreme Court case that the lady alluded to called Loving versus Virginia. I said that 13 states still prohibit individuals from having marriage equality. At that time, 14 states prohibited persons to marry someone of a different race. It was a felony if the president's mother and father had come to Virginia while they were married. They could have been subject to imprisonment for 5 years. The Supreme Court unanimously struck down those 14 laws 50 years from now. And now we think, of course, that was never the laws of the United States. Of course, people can marry someone of a different race. 50 years from now, I am confident that the people of this country will say, it was never against the law to marry the person you love.
To not have it even be an issue?
Exactly.
To not have it be something anybody even
over.
thinks about?
Yeah.
Over.
What was the fuss about?
What do you want young people to take away from this talk?
Well, I hope that just this whole process has been one of communicating with people. I suspect most everybody here is supportive of what we've been saying, but we take every opportunity we can to talk about these issues, because the more we talk about it, the more people understand what this is all about, and the more people come to believe that this is where America needs to be, and this is where we all need to be in our hearts, and every single individual can do something to make it more likely to happen.
Ted Olson, Lady Olson, thank you so much.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Frank.